Right, well, thank you very much for coming. I've already spoken to the people here, but those of you that have joined online, welcome. And I'm hoping that if you've got questions, you will actually put them on the chat and put a Q or question in front so that we can spot them online here and ask them for you. I'll try and alternate between those in the room and those online. So please start getting your questions in as quickly as possible, and we'll be able to go to you straight away. I'm so pleased that today we have with us Nicola Fox, Dr. Nicola Fox, I should say, Associate Administrator from the Science Mission side of NASA. Mm-hmm. And I hope that we've got some interesting questions to come up, because I think she's prepared to answer a few of them. I think we've got Geb here who will stop us if we stray too far in the wrong direction. So what I'd like to kick off with, and I think this is something all of us would like to know, is how did you get into space? And how did you, as a UK citizen, get to be administrator at NASA?
So that's a great question. And a lot of it, I think, is luck and being in the right place at the right time. And when somebody offers you an opportunity, kind of being brave enough to take that opportunity. So I did physics at Imperial College. I wasn't sure at the end of it whether science was for me. I struggled a little bit at Imperial. I came from a very small all-girls school, and I went into where, I could do whatever subjects I liked because there was no stereotypes. And then I went to Imperial, where it was 220 people on the course, and about 15% were women. And it was a very, very, very different environment, and a very competitive environment. And I had a lot of I don't want to ask a question because people in the room are going to think I'm stupid if I ask the question. Whereas, you later in life, you realize that probably 85% of the people in the room had that same question and would have been really happy if I'd asked it. So I did, I kind of, don't worry. So I went to the University of Surrey and Guildford, and I did a master's, kind of combined master's in telecommunication and satellite engineering, because I thought maybe I would be an engineer. While I was there, I continually was told by my professors, one of whom actually I met last year, who reminded me that he was the person who'd said this to me, told me I thought like a scientist and I didn't think like an engineer, and I asked the wrong questions. And while I believe there is never a wrong question or a dumb question, I apparently thought about things in a different way. So I was always worried about why and not how. And I would be, was very much interested in the other part. And he said, I'd love you to stay and do a PhD, but really think you're a scientist. And so I went to Imperial College and I did a PhD in space plasma physics, not really thinking at that time that NASA was, it didn't occur to me. So I actually thought I would go and do a postdoc at the university in England. I would stay doing space science research, but I would do sort of a postdoc and then maybe be lucky enough to be a lecturer or something. And that was the career path I thought I would have. And as I was finishing up my PhD, I went to a meeting in Alaska to discuss basically aurora and what triggers aurora. And I was presenting my work. I had a poster presentation, which I keep telling young scientists, always do the poster, not the oral presentation, because you have way more opportunity to engage with people that you don't get if you just do a 15-minute talk and sit down. And so I'm, chatting away and talking very excitedly about my work. And this senior scientist was listening, and he came over and he just said, "That's really, really interesting. Would you be interested in applying for a postdoc at NASA?" And I had no idea that was actually open to me, that was a real thing, that that was something that it was something that a UK citizen could do. And so I went through the very complicated, long application process, and I was selected. And so I went to Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland, and I did about 3 years there, and then I got hired by the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, and I loved being there. It was a very, very good fit for my personality, a lot of focus on working in teams, a lot of high performing teams as well, because anyone who does space space is not for the faint of heart. There's so many things that could go wrong. There's so many challenges. And working in a team where you all get together and just face those challenges, is a really awesome thing. So I was there. My proudest thing was being the project scientist for Parker Solar Probe. I got, I will say, aggressively pursued to come to NASA headquarters and lead the heliophysics division. And so about 3 weeks after we launched Solar Probe, I checked in at NASA headquarters. So I led the heliophysics division for just over 4 years, and then was really lucky enough. I applied for this position to be the head of science and got selected. And it's an amazing job. I love it. I love it every day. It's a hard job. Gib will tell you I'm on 24/7, but I absolutely love it. It's just the thrill of a lifetime.
Physics therefore fit the bill, because engineers spend their time looking for solutions, whereas physicists are thinking much broader as to where to go next.
Yes, and I think, so I would say physicists create the challenges that the engineers have to solve. But I think again, working at the Applied Physics Lab, the link and the relationship between the scientists and the engineers was really amazing. And I won't say it's unique to APL, but I will say it is very prevalent at APL, so that the engineers were excited about the missions that they were working on because they were excited about the science, and they felt that they were actually enabling the scientists. And we worked very closely with the engineers, on sometimes the trades. Hey, you want to measure everything everywhere all of the time. And you know what, Nikki, you just can't. But let's see how we can iterate and meet in the middle. And so that's something that I've always really just enjoyed, that working with the engineers to enable these really amazing things. I'll just share it was an amazing experience. But when Eugene Parker came to the Applied Physics Lab, we'd named the mission so Parker Solar Probe became Parker Solar Probe. And he came to the lab, and I had the great privilege of taking Eugene Parker into the clean room to essentially meet his spacecraft. And it was and yes, I did say Parker, meet Parker, but he stood in front of it and he was tearful about, like, I can't believe I'm looking at this incredible piece of machinery that is mind-blowing because of what it's going to do, and you're actually going to go do my science. And so a lot of the engineers were they're in the clean room and they're all kind of bobbing up like, hey, can you introduce me to Eugene Parker? And so I said, yes, would you like to meet some of the engineers? And one of them in particular was a young engineer, and he did sort of like the 2-hand shake with Eugene Parker, and he's just keeping on with the shaking because he's so excited about meeting Dr. Parker. And he kept saying, what an honor it was. And Gene literally said, no, it's an honor for me to meet you. And the engineers were all like, oh, he's probably just saying that. And as we walked out of the clean room, I said something to him, and he goes, no, I said, well, that was really nice of you to talk to the engineers like that. And he said, no, all I did was write a paper. And I said, well, it's a pretty good paper, Gene, And he said, yeah, but if you get to the sun and it turns out my theory is wrong, I'll just write another paper. Whereas if we get to the sun and your calculations are wrong, there is no mission. And, and that was very eye-opening for somebody to have come up through a very different, he was in a university environment all the time. He really hadn't done any practical, hands-on stuff. For him to actually really appreciate the brilliance of the engineers. Your slogan, from imagination to reality, that's what I think we do all the time. The scientists write their requirements, we design the missions, we don't even do any of that. Sorry. The scientists come up with the questions that we want to answer. We work with the engineers to do the kind of overall mission design, but it's the engineers that make it a reality. And Solar Probe was only imagination until somebody came up with a brilliant idea of how to do it. And now it's reality.
Right. Well, I'll stick to engineering then. Yes, my daughter went to the science route, as we discussed earlier. And the interesting thing was, in America, in the USA, do they have many girls-only schools or colleges?
They are not as common as I think they are here. There are maybe more religious, so Catholic schools. Like my son actually goes to an all boys school, but my daughter does not wish to go to an all girls school. She wants to go to a public high school, but she has different interests, and James is very focused. He wants to be actually right now he wants to be a CFO. But he wants to be a CFO of like a rocket company, or he's very specific, very niche here. But he wants that technical background, but he wants to sort of do the enabling piece. And so I keep telling him engineering first, because you can always go to finance, but it's really hard to do finance and then say, I wish I'd been an engineer. So he was very focused coming into high school on either wanting to do sort of more like civil engineering with an eye to like sustainable buildings and zero footprint, or to be either an aerospace engineer, or designing high performance engines, whether it was cars or rockets. He was very interested in that. So.
Well, they're following in your footsteps.
Maybe one day it's a CFO. We'll see.
Yes, they'll get the funds for you.
I hope so. Yes.
I'll ask one more question, and I'm going to throw it over into the room and to the online. Were you aware of the British Interplanetary Society's existence when you were doing all this introduction to space?
So it's interesting. I wasn't, and actually, when I got your very kind invitation to come, I immediately started looking it up, and then I had that moment of how did I not know about this? Because I used to go to Royal Society lectures and various things. I loved their Christmas lectures, and I did a lot of that, but I wasn't aware. But then, as we've been chatting today, I've actually realized that I was aware of a lot of the stuff. I just wasn't really aware of the umbrella organization. And some of the innovation that's come from this society is really amazing. So now I'm very aware of it, and I'm now a big fan. But I wasn't actually, no.